I'm sorry, but I got one of my students pregnant. I need a divorce. My husband, a high school teacher, told me out of the blue with those selfish words. I guess I fell in love with your husband without even realizing it. So just leave the rest to me and get out of here, old lady. My husband's student said with an innocent smile, not showing any remorse at all. Well, I guess young women really are the best after all. My husband said as he handed me the divorce papers, which I filled out mechanically. Every day, my husband would invite this student over to our house and they'd be alone together in his room for career counseling. I'd been suspicious of their relationship for a while at that point. But my husband insisted he wasn't doing anything wrong. I had no choice but to believe him. However, I'm not a complete idiot. Where there's smoke, there's fire. I had already hired a private investigator to look into my husband's suspicious behavior. And when I found out the true identity of this student, I couldn't help but smirk. As I left the house with the divorce papers, I left the two of them with a parting gift. You really shouldn't have picked that particular girl, you know. Well, you'll find out soon enough. With a meaningful smile, I left. My name is Nancy. My husband Steve and I are from the same hometown and were even in the same grade at school. I never paid him any special attention when we were little, but in high school he confessed his feelings for me and we started dating. Things went well and we got married soon after graduating from college. As for our careers, we both became teachers in our hometown. I teach at a junior high school, while my husband teaches at a high school. Even though we're both 38 now, we still don't have any kids. But we were both so devoted to our students that it didn't really bother us. My husband felt the same way, apparently exchanging contact info with his students and frequently consulting with them about their problems. He said he was trying to be a friendly, approachable teacher, but honestly, it didn't really fit with my own educational philosophy. Getting too close to students comes with all sorts of risks. I'd ask my husband from time to time if everything was really okay, but he'd always calmly reply, "Don't worry about it," so I had no choice but to drop it and just keep an eye on things. And so, even though we still had 30 years left on the 35-year mortgage for the house we bought, my husband and I were both proud of our work as teachers and were living a modest but happy life. One day, as I was preparing dinner in the kitchen, the doorbell rang. My husband was in the living room, fiddling with his phone. He never usually answers the door himself, but for some reason, that day he quickly got up from the couch and went to the front door. I thought it was strange, but I kept on cooking dinner. But then after a little while, I heard a woman crying. Startled, I headed for the front door, still holding the carrots I was chopping for soup. Sorry, one of my students is having trouble deciding on her future plans. So I figured I'd invite her over to the house to have a good long talk about it. You did what? I was so shocked I didn't even have time to hide the carrots. I knew he'd been in close contact with his students, but I never thought he'd actually invite them to our house. And this girl, Chelsea, was quite beautiful, I have to admit. She had a very mature figure. It was hard to believe she was wearing a school uniform. As someone who spends all day with junior high schoolers, I was really struck by how sexy this high school girl was. Sorry, but could you make enough dinner for her too? We can't exactly send her home now. My husband said, calm as always, unlike me. He said it so matter-of-factly that I ended up going along with it and wound up serving Chelsea dinner. It's delicious. I don't like the carrots in the soup though, so I'm not gonna eat those, Chelsea said with an innocent smile. I'd thought she seemed mature earlier, but that smile and her blunt comment made me realize that she really is still a kid after all. I felt relieved, or maybe reassured. It was a complicated feeling. She'd been crying earlier and I'd been worried about what would happen, but she seemed to have cheered up, so let's just say this was all part of helping a student with her problems. With that in mind, I got up from my seat to start clearing the plates, but right then my husband said, I need to talk to her in private about some important stuff related to her future plans, so we're gonna go to the bedroom. Wait, the bedroom? Yeah, I need to respect my students' privacy. You're a teacher too, so you ought to get that without me spelling it out. Oh, okay, should I bring some coffee to the room later then? No, just try to stay away from the bedroom as much as you can. With that, my husband went upstairs to his room together with Chelsea. Students' career paths are definitely an important and private matter. I knew that even as his wife, I shouldn't carelessly eavesdrop on them, just like he said. But still, I couldn't help feeling uneasy with him alone with such a beautiful girl. However, the fact that my husband was being so level-headed, and the innocent smile Chelsea gave me as she thanked me before going to my husband's room, kept my unease from spiraling out of control. In the end, I resisted the urge to bring them coffee several times, respecting my husband's instructions and not going near the bedroom at all. After about 2 hours, Chelsea left with a refreshed look on her face. My husband seemed completely normal too, so I felt relieved and decided to go back to my usual routine. But that relief was short-lived. Chelsea started coming to our house frequently to see my husband. When the intercom rang, my husband would go straight to the front door to greet Chelsea, and they'd go directly to my husband's room without even passing through the living room. And of course, I wasn't allowed in. There was even one time when I got home late because I had to stay late at work, only to find the two of them already holed up in the bedroom. Chelsea always had that same innocent smile. Was she really coming just to talk about her problems with my husband? The more I tried to figure out what was behind that smile and my husband's unchanged behavior, the more I got a bad feeling about it and the more scared I got. So I tried my best not to think about it at all. But even that effort had its limits after it went on for a month. I finally snapped at my husband in anger. It's not normal for her to be coming over to the house every single day like this. My husband had just gotten home from school and was in the bedroom loosening his tie. It can't be helped. Problems with deciding your future aren't the kind of thing you can solve that easily. Still, people don't normally invite students to their house this often. What would you think if I had a male student over instead, huh? What the heck are you two talking about in there? Her family situation is complicated. Obviously, I can't go into details since it involves a student's private matters. Then at least do it in the living room when I'm around. If you're there when she's not used to you, there's stuff she won't be able to talk about. This is way more delicate than you think. Just try to understand that I'm helping someone out here. My husband was as calm as ever, changing out of his suit into casual clothes without ever once looking at my agitated face. Don't worry, it's not like I'm doing anything suspect. Now come on, make me some dinner. With that, he finished changing and headed down to the living room ahead of me. The difference in how emotional we were being made me feel like an idiot for getting angry. In the end, I decided to trust my husband. He's the kind of teacher that even students' parents call a good teacher. I wanted to believe that he would never do the kinds of things I was imagining, if only for appearance's sake. Still feeling complicated, I started getting dinner ready. Then one day, I was out shopping for groceries after work as usual when I got a rare call from my mother. Nancy, I'm not totally sure 'cause he was wearing sunglasses, but I could have sworn I saw Steve walking arm in arm with some young girl in the next town over. Those words from my mother hit me like I'd been stabbed in the back. She sent me a photo through a messaging app right after that. I looked at it nervously. There was no mistake, it was a picture of my husband and Chelsea. Still in shock, I stood there in a daze. But at the same time, a part of me calmly thought I knew it. Even though their time together had been so obvious, I'd stayed quiet and let it happen even though I knew. Filled with regret, I vowed to expose my husband's infidelity no matter what. You know, I feel like I might have seen that girl around our neighborhood. Really? Hey, is it okay if I stop by the house now? I want to hear more. I headed straight from my shopping trip to my parents' house. And just to be safe, I decided to contact a private investigator as well. 2 months passed. Chelsea was still coming to see my husband as always, but instead of holing up in his room right away like usual, the two of them came into the living room where I was. My husband, who was usually so calm, was acting strange today. He seemed almost giddy, grinning at me. Seeing his face, I had a vague idea of what was about to happen. "I'm sorry, but Chelsea's pregnant. I'm gonna take responsibility, so I need a divorce," my husband said, handing me divorce papers that were already filled out. "I guess I fell in love with you somewhere along the way, Steve." "Sorry about that, old lady," Chelsea said, her normally innocent smile twisted into something ugly and mean-spirited. Just to be sure, I asked my husband if he really had no regrets, but he replied nope without any hesitation, putting his arm around Chelsea's shoulders. I took the divorce papers from my husband without a word, signed them just as readily, and told him I'd file them with the lawyer myself. "Sorry, Nancy, no hard feelings. But I'm telling ya, young women really are the best. Don't you worry, Grandma, I'm gonna make Steve happy. You can leave in peace." My normally level-headed husband was nowhere to be seen, totally taken in by this young, wicked woman. I started packing my things to leave right away, glancing sideways at the two of them. "Are you all packed? Once you're done, get out of here fast. Chelsea, once this old bag is gone, you can use this house however you want." "Yay! I love you, honey," Chelsea said, hopping and skipping around in a way you wouldn't expect from a pregnant woman. I finished packing and was ready to leave, but I left my husband with one last meaningful line as I walked out. Along with a defiant grin. "You really shouldn't have picked that particular girl, you know." "Well, you'll find out soon enough." 10 months passed. I was living with my mother in my parents' house while continuing to teach junior high school. My father had passed away 5 years ago, so it was just me and my mother living together in the house now. One day, as my mother and I were eating dinner, the intercom rang. My mother checked the monitor and then looked at me with a furrowed brow. "Nancy, it's Steve." I thought to myself, so he's come. Him showing up here must mean he's run into exactly the kind of trouble the private investigator had discovered. I slurped my carrot soup with a smirk. "What should we do? Should I let him in?" "No need. He'll go home eventually, let's just ignore him." But Steve showed no signs of leaving, and I could even hear him start shouting, "Come out here," at the front door. I reluctantly decided to go see him. I opened the door to find my former husband looking haggard and worn down. Seeing him like that made me smirk again. "Can I help you? It's quite a nuisance to have a stranger like you shouting in front of someone's house, you know." "Nancy, please! Help me, I'm begging you!" Steve pleaded, his eyes bloodshot, trying to grab my hand. I deftly brushed him off. "I'm begging you! Chelsea still hasn't had the baby. And ever since she dropped out of high school and moved into the house, shady people have been coming by every single day and turning it into their hangout." "Oh my, sounds lively and fun. Maybe you should offer career counseling to those delinquents too." "This isn't a joke. God, what am I supposed to do? I still have a mortgage, and the neighbors are complaining about the noise. I can't live there anymore. What the hell am I gonna do?" Steve crumpled to the ground right there in the doorway. I looked down at my pathetic ex-husband, unable to stop grinning. "Oh? Didn't you tell that girl she could use the house however she wants? It's in your name after all. You need to take responsibility. Come on, help me out here. At least let me stay here for the night. I've got nowhere else to go. Please, help me," Steve begged, turning to my mother. Of course, my mother took my side after hearing the whole story. "Now, Steve, don't you think that's asking a bit much? You're a stranger to us now. You chose a young girl, your own student, no less, over our daughter. And you think you can just waltz into our home? I never thought things would end up like this. I just wanted to fool around with a pretty young girl, that's all. It was a moment of weakness. I swear I'll never do it again. Please, help me." It was pathetic, almost comical. I wasn't content to just smirk anymore, I was roaring with laughter inside. "I can't believe you have the nerve to say something so embarrassing in front of us. And you call yourself a teacher? Do you have any idea how much you hurt my daughter with your little moment of weakness? I'd say this is exactly what you deserve." Well, I'd say this is a classic case of you reap what you sow. Karma's a you-know-what. Go on, no amount of groveling will get you in here. Go to a hotel or wherever.
No, please! I'm begging you, help me! I'll never do anything like this again, I swear.
Mom, would you mind calling the police? He's disturbing the neighbors, I said, looking down at my husband. Found you, Steve. Been a while, hasn't it? I hear you've been causing my daughter a lot of trouble, a tough-looking man in a shirt said, approaching while my mother was inside calling the police. I recognized him as Chelsea's father, Ben, based on the private investigator's report.
Don't tell me.
Long time no see. It's Ben, right? Ben was a real delinquent who used to bully and extort Steve back when we were in junior high school together. Of course, Steve was terrified of him. The private investigator's findings also said that these days, Ben was mafia, just like he looked.
Daughter, you mean Chelsea? No way.
Huh? You calling me a liar? You got some nerve, pal. My girl's been telling me how you've been forcing yourself on her and she's fed up with it. You better pay up if you don't want this to get any bigger.
No, that's not. I had no idea she was your daughter. If I'd known, this never would've.
My husband's face, already haggard, turned deathly pale, like he was about to pass out. Shut up. I don't want to hear your excuses. You want me to take you back to my office and we can discuss this further?
No. I'm sorry.
Any trace of my normally calm and collected ex-husband was long gone. Soon, I could hear the sirens of the police car my mother had called. Ben seemed to realize this wasn't a good time, so he shot Steve a sharp glare and said he'd be back before leaving. The police arrived and I explained the situation.
Wait. I'm Nancy's husband, I'm a high school teacher. I didn't do anything wrong. Nancy, don't just stand there, help me.
Steve pleaded with me yet again as the police officer tried to apprehend him and take him away. Officers, he's my ex-husband, so this has nothing to do with me. Please, take him away. Goodbye, honey, I said, my voice dripping with scorn as I pushed my ex-husband away.
No, stop. This is gonna go on my record. It'll ruin both our reputations as teachers. Please, I'm begging you, help me.
Steve shouted as he was shoved into the police car. The commotion had drawn a crowd of neighbors around the car. I noticed that there were a few students in my husband's high school's uniform mixed in. They must have been passing by on their way home from school. The students watched in shock as their teacher was taken away. Some of them even filmed it on their phones. I'm sure the story would spread through the school in no time and Steve's teaching career would be in shambles. As I watched the police car drive off with my ex-husband, I celebrated my total victory inside and gave a triumphant fist pump. After Steve was taken away, it seems the police really grilled him. The court even issued a restraining order saying he wasn't allowed to come near me ever again. The students who witnessed the whole scene of Steve being taken away spread the rumors throughout the school in no time, as expected. And then Steve was grilled at school too, and when it came out that the reason was the unprecedented scandal of him making a move on and trying to impregnate his own student, he was of course fired on disciplinary grounds.
Nancy! Come here for a sec. Look at this, it's a big deal.
My mother called out to me one day, sounding shocked as she watched TV.
That's Steve, isn't it?
On the screen was a daytime talk show doing an extensive report using Steve's real name in regards to this scandal. Serves him right that it's blown up into such a big thing. Apparently he gave that woman his credit card and she maxed it out, and then he even took out revolving payment loans. That's what the private investigator told me, I said, my arms crossed as I looked down at the pathetic man on TV with utter disdain. Well, he's in a real bind now, my mother said, but she clearly had no sympathy at all as she munched on rice crackers. I bet he's up to his eyeballs in debt by now. And with all the public attention this is getting, it'll be hard for him to get another job. By the way, what happened to the girl? Chelsea, was it? Well, get this, Mom. The private investigator told me that woman actually had another man she was serious about, and apparently he found out about her relationship with Steve. As I spoke, I prepared tea for both of us and took one of my mother's rice crackers.
Oh my, so Steve was just a fling then?
Seems that way.
And it looks like that other guy broke things off with her because of it, so she had no choice but to go along with it. But then I guess out of spite, she got together with one of her delinquent friends and wound up pregnant this time. Oh dear, what a sorry state of affairs.
But this gossip was clearly the perfect snack to go with our tea.
The guy who got her pregnant was apparently just fooling around too, and disappeared off somewhere.
Is that so?
She's gonna have a tough time.
Even so, my mother showed no sympathy whatsoever as she sipped her tea nonchalantly.
Anyway, I'm so glad you happened to spot them that time, Mom. Otherwise, I never would have thought to hire a private investigator. I'm just happy I could help protect my daughter. Your father probably would have handled it even better if he were still alive.
That's not true.
Well, I guess Steve's fate would have been the same either way. But I can't imagine how awful it would have been if I'd been hurt by the divorce without knowing anything.
Thinking back on it now, the idea that I might have just taken it lying down back then sends a chill down my spine. But this dramatic turnaround all started with my mother spotting them by chance. I'm sure Dad must be looking down from above, happy that we did well.
You're absolutely right. This is for the best. Like you said, they both got exactly what they deserved, karmic retribution.
Seriously.
I'm tempted to use it as an example the next time I teach a lesson on expressions. Oh, don't do that, it'll be a bad influence on the kids.
Yeah, I guess you're right. We both laughed heartily and crunched on crackers together as we watched my ex-husband's downfall on TV like spectators looking down from on high. Now that the whole world knew about him, I figured he'd never come to see me again. I decided to forget all about him and focus on my work from now on. But apparently, my ex-husband wasn't ready to give up so easily. Just as the news reports using his real name were starting to die down and the public was about to move on to the next hot topic, the intercom rang one day. When I checked the monitor, there was Steve. He looked like he'd just escaped from prison on top of his previous haggard appearance. His hair was a mess, his beard was shaggy, and his clothes were all rumpled. Having such a seedy-looking man outside would be bad for our house's image. So I reluctantly decided to show my face one last time.
What are you doing here? Having you loitering around like that is a nuisance, you know?
I said, not a shred of sympathy in my voice for my radically changed ex-husband. Just like he had always been extremely calm before.
I'm sorry for everything up until now. So please, I'm begging you. My parents cut ties with me and I've got nowhere else to turn. That woman made me lose all my money. So please, can't you at least lend me some cash?
I crossed my arms and laughed through my nose exaggeratedly at his utterly foolish request.
Shall I explain the meaning of the word stranger to you? It means someone you have no connection to, someone who isn't your relative. If it were you, would you lend money to a stranger? Don't be so cold. Just a little is fine, I'll pay you back for sure. Come on, think of it as helping someone in need. You know, she said the same thing when she came to the house before. To think of it as helping someone. Sorry, but I'm not the kind of gal who can help just anyone out like that. Come on, we used to love each other. We were together since we were little, remember? Hey, why don't we start over from scratch? That stuff about her being pregnant turned out to be a lie anyway. We could try again now. Shall I teach you how I feel right now? Utterly flabbergasted. I'm so appalled I'm at a loss for words. You are a teacher, so you ought to be able to manage money.
He must have really hated my attitude, because Steve finally blew up at me right then and there.
Screw you. I'm your husband, damn it. How dare you talk to me like that?
No matter how much he ranted and raved like an idiot, my emotions remained as placid as a mirror, not budging an inch. In the end, my mother came out. When she held up her phone and threatened, "I'm calling the police," he immediately shut up and left. I thought he must have finally learned his lesson this time, but Steve actually kept coming to the house after that, demanding I lend him money. We'd coldly turn him away each time and even got the police involved, but he showed no signs of giving up at all. Luckily, the neighbors knew the situation and actively reported him to the police whenever they saw him, trying to help us out. A man who caused a commotion with the police every single time he came to the house, the pinnacle of annoyance. In the end, we decided this was going nowhere, so after the fourth time Steve got taken away, we resolved to sell the house and move elsewhere. I also decided to quit my job for the time being. I feel bad for the neighbors who helped us out, but we quietly slipped away to our new home without telling anyone where we were going, not even relatives. Surely we'll never see that man again now. Sometime later, my mother ran into one of our old neighbors by chance. According to them, these days that man is a pathetic sight, a gambling addict in ragged clothes, playing with bloodshot eyes. Whenever he loses, he angrily pounds on the machine and gets scolded by the staff. He sold that house and lives in a cheap house now, and apparently the one coming to collect from a man so deep in debt is none other than Ben the Mafia. It seems Chelsea and Ben were scheming to swindle Steve from the very beginning with that fake pregnancy. How ironic, to be threatened to pay back loans by the same guy who bullied and extorted him as a kid. As for Chelsea, she ended up getting ditched by the guy and becoming a single mother. The neighbor's daughter was in the same grade as her in school, and she says Chelsea dropped out, doesn't have a full-time job, and is juggling part-time gigs. That pretty face of hers is long gone, replaced by a haggard look. You reap what you sow, what goes around comes around. This is a world where bad people always get their just desserts. I took the interview at a school in our new town and got to start over as a junior high school teacher again. I met a kind male teacher there, and we've made plans to go out to dinner together. I don't know if I'll end up marrying him yet, but I'm optimistic about the future.